Hello, it's Thursday night. Any hobos out there wanting to hear a story? Time to read from Voodoo Days at La Casa Fabulosa. I'm David Domine. I'm in the Magic Library. If you're out there, check in. Let us know where you're from. Hey, Belinda, Jamie, Wendy. Wendy's in Slade, by the way. Missy, Beth. So check in. Let us know where you're from. Let us know what you're drinking tonight. And we'll pick up where we left off last night. So I'm back to bourbon tonight. I have Benchmark. So cheers. Hey, Laura and Lisa and Sue. I'm drinking out of my nice tumbler Matt Sweeney dropped off on my front porch the other day with a bottle of Angel's Envy. These are really nice tumblers. So I hope everyone had a good day. I've been eating like a lumberjack all day. I had sausage and eggs for breakfast, and I think I've eaten 3 or 4 lunches today, and I'll eat dinner after this. So, oh well, that's what you do in quarantine. But if you remember last night, we left off. Hey, Amanda. Hey, Sonia, Catherine. So we left off with a chapter that was about a voodoo night. I had strange things happening at night. Usually my voodoo days, all these weird coincidences would happen during the day, but we had a night of strange events. And that's when I found out something about Louisville's voodoo history. It turns out there was a famous voodoo doctor in New Orleans who was from Kentucky. And we found out that at that time, the Voodoo Society of America was headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky. This was when I wrote the book, or when this was all happening around 2000, so 20 years ago. And I found all this out on June 24th, which was the high holy day for practitioners of voodoo. So it was another strange occurrence. But we're going to read 2 chapters tonight. And this first one is called Out of the Woodwork, because once word got around that I was writing about ghosts and spooky things in the neighborhood, I got lots of interesting visitors. So, hey, Mike Horan, Diane, Sylvia, Becky, good to have you. So, like I said, check in, let people know where you are. You can check in at the Magic Library, David's Magic Library on Facebook. You can check in at America's Most Haunted Neighborhood, Voodoo Days at La Casa Fabulosa. Or just La Casa Fabulosa is the check-in spot. But let people know where you are. We're trying to get the word out about Old Louisville, this beautiful historic preservation district in Louisville, Kentucky. And there's VG and Thomas again. Good to have the Pink Palace people. And Susie, Steve, good to see you all back. Okay? So, like I said, we're a little over halfway through the book already. So we've only got this much remaining. So I'll try to milk it out, try to get another week or so out of this. We'll see what happened. What happened to the goat, we'll find out tonight, Sue. So you remember the chapter before, the chapter I read last night, I got knocked over by a goat. Okay, so hobo, yeah. I don't know if I get called a hobo tonight, but we're going to meet a real live hobo tomorrow night in the reading, okay? So there's Aunt Jane, hi. So we're going to continue now with Out of the Woodwork. Welcome, everyone, and this is the first of 2 chapters I'm going to read tonight. The rest of summer was largely uneventful, and by the time classes started for the fall semester, word had gotten out that abnormal things were afoot at Widmer House, and that I was writing a book about neighborhood haunts. The Courier-Journal ran an article about it, and soon the phone began ringing off the hook. Although I had made no such claims, I'd suddenly become an expert in the paranormal. I also received a steady stream of emails offering advice and informing me of other purported hauntings in the area. Some shared their stories of the supernatural and asked me for advice. So I was not terribly surprised when I received an email late one night from 2 university students at Bellarmine, where I taught, who were convinced that their dorm room was haunted. I agreed to meet them in my office the next morning and hear their story. The following day, they showed up at the appointed time and eagerly pulled up chairs next to my desk. Within several minutes, I had an overview of their paranormal experiences. Strange reflections on the wall, orbs showing up on film, a ghost who liked to take the socks off one person in the middle of the night and put them back on another. "And we got tons of pictures to prove it, too," said one of the bouncy heads. "Yeah, show 'em the one with the orbs," said the other. Well, pictures are always good. I nodded my head, eager to see what anomalies they had captured on film. "Let's see what you have." "Well, like we took this picture on the weekend, and there's a bazillion orbs all over the place." The bouncier of the two reached across the desk and handed me a photograph. I examined it briefly, taking note of the many white specks that the camera had captured floating around the small dorm room. I considered the picture for another second or two and then came to my conclusion. You know, I'm not a parapsychologist. I write ghost stories," I said. "So I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you what I think is going on here and you can go from there." They looked at me and nervously nodded their assent. "Well, people think our orbs," I said, "oftentimes turn out to be dust particles and nothing more. That's what it looks like here, especially since there are so many of them." No, those are orbs for sure," said the less bouncy co-ed. "I can feel it." Well, like I said, that's only my opinion, and I'm not an expert. But I'll be happy to give you a few numbers, and you can call, and maybe they can help you a little more. I scratched a couple numbers down on a notepad and handed the paper across the desk. "Out of curiosity," I said, "what were you doing prior to these pictures? Were you cleaning or anything like that? That could stir up quite a bit of dust." "Nah," said the bouncier of the two. "Our neighbors and us was having a pillow fight. No cleaning or anything like that." I paused for a moment and looked them in the eyes, wishing I had on a pair of reading glasses that I could push down the bridge of my nose to convey a sense of gravity. You do understand that four girls banging each other over the heads with pillows might cause a bit of dust to fly, don't you? Yeah," said the less bouncy one, "but these were real orbs, I can tell." The other one moved her head up and down in agreement. "Yeah, real orbs for sure." I tried my hardest to sound pleasant. "Well, what else do you have by way of pictures? What about these strange reflections?" "Oh, yeah, look at this," said the bouncier one. "There's this mysterious reflection on the wall that only shows up when we take pictures." "Yeah," said the other one. "It's super creepy. I know it's a ghost." I reached across the desk and accepted the photo she handed to me. The grainy picture showed the same dorm room, but from a different angle. To the left stood a wooden bunk bed, and two desks had been pushed up against the opposite wall. The walls were covered in a variety of large, shiny posters and smaller framed photographs. "See," said the really bouncy one, pointing to a small rectangle of light on the wall next to the bed. "It's a phantom or something hovering on the wall." Her expression conveyed a look of grave concern. "Did you ever consider the possibility that this could be a reflection from one of the," I paused to count, 32 framed pictures on the wall? The glass looks awfully shiny to me." "Nah," said the lesser of the bouncy girls. "It only shows up when we take pictures at night. Here, look at this one. You see almost the same thing." She handed me another photograph. "You mean it only appears at night when the bright and shiny flash goes off on your camera?" I reached behind my ear and scratched my head. "Uh-huh." She had obviously missed the sarcasm. "Well, like I said, I'm not an expert, but it looks like a reflection to me." I shuffled some papers in the hopes that they would take the hint and leave. But call one of those numbers for paranormal groups in the area and see what they have to say. "I'm pretty sure they're going to tell us it's a real ghost," said the non-bouncy girl with a frown. "Pictures just don't go around doing reflecty things and stuff like that." "Hey," said the more bouncy one, her eyes narrowing at the realization of my skepticism. "Do you really believe in ghosts or not?" "Yeah," said the other one, raising a strand of hair to her mouth and sucking on it. If you write about ghosts and stuff like that, you better believe in that, or that's not fair. I hate it when people ask me if I believe in ghosts. Not because it always puts me on the spot, but because I get tired of having to come up with inventive answers. Sometimes I believe in ghosts, sometimes I don't. Like sometimes I believe in UFOs, Bigfoot, and God, and then other times not. On the rare occasion that I answer this question, I usually tell them that I don't believe in ghosts per se because I have never seen an actual apparition or any kind of physical entity that might be called a ghost. I usually qualify this answer by clarifying that I am a firm believer in the unexplained, however. For me, the problem with ghosts is that nobody really knows what they are, if anything. Theories abound as to what constitutes them or the notion of hauntings, but are ghosts spirits that have been trapped in this realm and have not crossed over to the next? Or are they souls that have come back to visit us from the nether regions? Are they simply products of overly active imaginations, or could they arise out of mass hallucination or psychoses? Do the laws of physics support the notions of hauntings, and could they be natural phenomena that science has yet to explain away? I don't know if I believe in ghosts or not, and truth be told, I don't feel any particular compunction for the beliefs I have, nor do I sense an obligation to make up my mind to believe one way or the other. For the time being, I am perfectly content to wonder what, if anything, awaits for us out there when we die, delighting in the uncertainty of it all. For that reason, I decided to avoid the question and change the subject. Did you say something about a ghost changing your socks or something like that? Yeah, exclaimed the really bouncy girl. That's the creepiest part of all. It's like someone is coming in at night and playing tricks on us. Mildly intrigued, I crossed my hands in my lap and sat back in the chair. Well, what exactly happened? Said the non-bouncy girl. Saturday night, me and my boyfriend, we went to bed, and then, we woke up the next morning, and he had my socks on, and I had his socks on. It was super creepy. Yeah, I saw it with my own eyes, exclaimed the bouncier one. Are you sure you just didn't put on each other's socks by mistakes? I hoped the expectant look on my face would help her draw the most rational conclusion. Nuh-uh, no way, the bouncier one said. I would have remembered that. I see. So how many times has this happened then? I picked up my pencil and prepared to take some notes. Just that one time. She nodded gravely and looked to her friend for support. One time, right? Well, what exactly were you doing that night before you went to bed, if you don't mind my asking? The non-bouncy girl blushed a bit and smiled before answering. She said, we were out at a party and, yeah, said her friend, they got so wasted they could hardly walk. It was so hysterical. She started laughing and bounced with each intake of air, like totally wasted. Well, I think most people would probably say you put on each other's socks by mistake and just forgot about it. No, said the other one. I would remember something like that, and my boyfriend is really smart. He would remember that too. Okay, I see. Pulled the papers again and opened a file drawer. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but please call the numbers I gave you and let me know what they say. I'd be really anxious to get their take on it. Yeah, said the bouncier one, as she finally rose from her seat and pulled her friend to the door. I'm sure they'll tell us our room is haunted. Gotta be. No other logical explanation. The least bouncy of the two turned and looked at her roommate. Like maybe the girl who lived there before us was murdered in the room or something. Yeah, the other one's eyes widened with glee. Wouldn't that be way cool? I bet our room is haunted. Bumping into each other as they squeezed themselves through the door, they disappeared into the hallway without saying goodbye. So that's not the end of the chapter, but there's a chapter break there, and chapter breaks are a good time to have a drink. So cheers. I'm drinking Benchmark tonight in my beautiful tumbler that Matt Sweeney dropped off, so thanks, Matt. And if you're just checking in, tell people where you're from, what you're drinking, say hi. And we got more pages, like 4 or 5 left in this chapter. And then we got one other chapter, and then we're going to call it a night. So once again, check in if you can. Check in at La Casa Fabulosa on Facebook. Check in at Old Louisville, America's most haunted neighborhood. Or if you want, you can check in at... all right, I think we lost a bit, but I think we're back on okay. Lisa said she needed a breather. She's laughing good. And I think I told you when I started reading this, there were some of these chapters. I was laughing so hard when I wrote them, just recalling things and stuff. And some of the really funny ones are coming up. There's going to be a chapter where I go to a voodoo ceremony with drag queens. And tomorrow night we'll read about the hobo I met. Yeah, I better not move the phone, because every time I do, the connection kind of gets a little wonky. So now we got a little haze up there, but I'm not going to else, okay? So I think we're back on. Yeah, the screen froze up a couple times, but I think we're okay. All right, so I'm just going to double check. Hey, Lori, cousin Lori. Thompson, good to have you back. Marty. I think we're okay now, all right? So I think I'm going to try to move to the next room. I have to go out of the Magic Library, maybe. So let me see if I have to move. I'm going to try it one more time. We'll see what happens. I keep freezing. Steve says it keeps freezing at Hobo. All right, well, let's cross our fingers. Let's try it one more time. Okay, so shawl, my little cover on my lap. Cross your fingers. Okay. All right. Charles says it's a dangerous place for it to stop. All right. Well, it seems okay from my end now, so let me try, and if not, we'll have to move to the next room. If something happens, I get called. If I get interrupted again, I'll just move over to the next room, and usually there's not a problem there. Okay? Yeah, so we're picking up in the chapter where we left off, out of the woodwork, because the weirdos started coming out of the woodwork, basically. They found out I was writing a book. Okay? So we'll pick up at the break. So when I returned that afternoon, the front doorbell was ringing as I walked into the back door, and after quickly patting the dogs on the head, I ran to see who it was. A tall man, perhaps in his 30s, stood there and shuffled through a file he held out in front of him. When he saw me approach, he lowered the file and straightened out his shoulders. "Hi, can I help you?" I said. "Are you the guy writing the ghost book?" He looked expectantly at me and smiled. Yes. He didn't look very threatening, so I invited him inside. "Thanks," he said. "My friend said he wanted to come too, but he's running a little late. He might show up. He lives over on 2nd Street. "So what can I do for you?" I led him to a sofa and asked him to sit down. "I read about you in the paper, and I was wondering if you could help me with a situation I'm having." He opened the file and cast a glance at its contents. "The house down the block where I live is haunted. Really strange stuff is going on there." "Really?" I scooted forward to the edge of my settee. "What's been happening?" He took a deep breath and sighed, as if preparing himself for a very long story. "Well, all kinds of things," he said. "When I moved in last year, there was a creepy feeling all over the house, especially in the basement, and I have 2 cats, and they started to go crazy. They hated it when I took them down to the basement." He paused and turned to look out the window. "They jump up in the air like they were fighting with something, and then they'd end up hiding under the sofa." That's odd," I said. "What other kinds of things happened?" "Well, at first it was a bunch of weird feelings," he said, "but then I started hearing strange noises, creaks and groans on the stairs. He was there. Things like that." "Well, they do say that houses can make peculiar noises all by themselves." I looked around the room and raised a hand for emphasis. "Especially old ones. They settle and things like that." Wood expands and contracts with the change of the seasons. Yeah, that's what I was thinking at first. But then I started seeing things. He leaned his body toward me and lowered his voice. They started tormenting me. Well, what did you actually see? I said. And what did they do to you? At the beginning, I'd see white shadows out of the corner of my eye, like they were following me or something. But then one day, I turned around and actually saw one. Ever since then, they've been after me. He gave a paranoid glance over his shoulder and looked at me. Yeah, but what did you actually see? What happened? Oh, I'm not sure what they are, he said. Most of the time you can't see them, but the few times I saw them, they look like they're made of clouds or something, sort of white and vaporous. He shifted uneasily in his seat before continuing. I'm not sure if they're ghosts or aliens. Aliens? Yes, his eyes grew wide. They've got those big almond-shaped eyes, and they're really short. But it's like they're not real, made of stuff ghosts are made of, ectoplasm or whatever you call it. At the mention of aliens, my attention started to drift, and I caught myself staring out the front window until I realized the visitor was waiting for me to say something. Oh, so what about this torment you've been experiencing? They don't let me sleep, he said. He lifted a hand to his face and rubbed it across his eyes. They're always running around the house and messing things up. They're fighting with the cats all the time and bothering them. They won't let me keep a job, and I'm going to lose my house. I narrowed my eyes a bit. How are they keeping you from your job, and why are you losing your house? I'm always so tired I'm oversleeping and missing work all the time. My boss has given me my last warning, he said. I'm earning less than half of what I used to, so I can't make the house payments. He fell back against the rest and exhaled a long stream of air. It's driving me crazy. Although I had grown skeptical of names as soon as the word alien entered the conversation, I nonetheless found myself sympathizing with him and racked my brain for suggestions that might help his current situation. I was leaning in the direction of recommending a visit to the psychologist, but that seemed a bit heartless, so I resolved to at least talk him through his current anxiety. Have you thought about ignoring them? I said. Unfazed, he said he had tried that already. If I ignore them, then they just get mean. Well, exactly what did they do? I reached down and scratched Fritz, who had jumped up on the sofa beside me. They come down to the basement where my room is, and they carve things on my teeth, for one. He flew from his chair and started toward me. I flinched and wrinkled up my nose. What did you say? He knelt to me. Slowly, I seat, and he opened his mouth and used an index to lift his upper lip above his gum line. With his other finger, he pointed at the top row of teeth. See? Hesitantly, I leaned forward and studied the two central incisors in front of me. Once I was close enough, I was able to discern a smallish pentagram etched into the enamel of each tooth. Whoa! I exclaimed, quickly pushing myself away from him. Are they devil-worshipping aliens? I asked. I don't know. He returned to his spot on the sofa. Sometimes they carve triangles and circles, too. Last night was pentagrams for the first time. But I didn't see any triangles or circles, I said. Well, there's none there now, he said, but they usually go away in a couple of days. Are you serious? Yeah, he replied innocently. These here will be gone in a day or two. People are saying it's freezing, but nothing's freezing from my end. Seems like just maybe a select few. But yeah, so poor guy had things carved on his teeth. All right. So I think you need to go and see a dentist, I said. Maybe he can tell you what's going on. I leaned back and pulled Fritz close for assurance. I don't need a dentist to tell me what's going on, he said. Martian ghosts are carving up my snags at night. That's what's happening. I want to know why. Exasperation had turned his face red. And besides, I don't have insurance. Desperately in need of something to change the subject, I got up from my chair and walked to the console with the decanters on it. I'm sorry, I said. I completely forgot to ask if you'd like something to drink. Immediately, I wondered at the practicality of offering alcohol to a man who was receiving regular visit from pentagram carving aliens. But the clock had just struck 5 o'clock, so despite my reservations, I put several ice cubes in a glass and poured some bourbon over them. Tea, coffee, cocktail, bourbon. I held up my glass as an example. We got juice and soft drinks, too. He hesitated a brief moment and then shrugged his shoulders. I don't know if any of you could hear that. There's like a weird Tarzan sound outside. Yeah, I said snags, Helena. Um, so, sure, thanks, he said. I'll have what you're having. Okay, bourbon on the rocks. So I prepared the drink for him and dropped it off before I sat down in my spot. After the first swallow, his shoulders relaxed a bit and he smiled. So, what's in there? I waved my glass in the direction of the file in his lap. And what do you do with this story? He placed his drink on an end table and eagerly opened the file. That's the thing, he said. I have a couple pictures of them. Of the aliens? My voice rose a decibel. Yeah, he nodded his head. Aliens, ghosts, whatever they are. Well, how'd you manage to get pictures of them? I said. My friend Nate's the one who said he might meet me here today. He knows all about this stuff, and he told me to have a couple of cameras lying around in case, you know. He reached down and lifted a large photograph from the stack in his file. He said when I sensed they were nearby, I should start shooting shots all over the place and hope I caught something. So I did. And you actually got something on film? Oh, yeah. He handed me the picture in his grasp. A couple of days ago, I was down in the basement, and I could tell that they were there because the cats were going crazy. My pets kept hissing and jumping in the air like they were attacking something. I was trying to keep asleep on the couch, and they had left a disposable camera, or I had left a disposable camera on the coffee table. When the cats started acting up, I jumped up and started taking pictures all over the place. I studied the enlarged photo and flinched when the main image came into view. In the background, an armchair in a corner of a paneled room took up one half of a picture. The other side of the picture was covered with a milky shape that was unmistakably part of a face. I clearly made out a small mouth, openings for nostrils where the nose was, and a huge almond-shaped eye. It looks like I got half of its face, as if he was looking in my direction, the man said. Right? Yeah, I said, it's a face all right, but of what? Yeah, just like I said, ghost or alien. I'm not sure, but I'd probably say alien. I couldn't believe my own ears. It looks exactly like the drawings of aliens you see on TV or in the magazines. Cool, here's another one, he said, handing over an enlarged photograph. I've got more, but these are the best too. The picture showed the same basement, but from a different angle. In the center of the shot, an orange tabby cat hovered in the air, fangs bared in an apparent hiss as it splayed out its limbs at an attacker. The attacker was a wispy, white shape that bent over the cat in taunt. Although the lower part of the body tapered off into nothingness, the upper portion had a distinct human form and a head with two enormous almond-shaped eyes seemingly focused on the cat. Creepy, huh? A large grin had spread over his face. Very creepy indeed, I said. If these are real things you're capturing on film, you need to show them to a real parapsychologist or a photographic expert, someone who might be able to help you better. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. That could be Nate, he said from the parlor as I went to open the door. Hey, I'm Nate. An individual stood on the other side of the door. He held up a palm with splayed fingers in the familiar Klingon greeting, like that. Ah, a Trekkie, I thought to myself, or a Trek or whatever they're called. Come on inside, I said. Your friend's in here. After another Klingon salute, he sat down on the sofa next to his friend. So, what do you think about those pictures? He asked. Far out, huh? Oh, yeah, they are, I said. Seeing the wistful glance he gave his friend's glass of bourbon, I offered him a drink and got up to serve him. For several minutes, the conversation drifted from ghosts to alien to cats. Then Nate started asking questions about the book I had started. "That's a cool idea to write a book about the ghosts in Louisville," he said. "But you should write one about Lexington, too. They got tons of ghost stories there. That's where I'm living now." "Yeah, that would make a great book," I said. "But I think I'll leave it to someone who lives in Lexington. I'm not from there, so I don't know that I'd have the expertise to write something like that." "I know what you mean," he said. "I'm not from there either." "Oh, where are you from then?" I grabbed a dish of mixed nuts and passed them around. "No, I'm not from here," he said with a raise of his eyebrows, placing an inordinate amount of emphasis on the last word. "You're not from Louisville? Are you from somewhere else in Kentucky?" I said. "No, I'm not from here," he said. "I'm not even from this planet." "Oh, I see." I shifted nervously in my chair, making sure to keep a smile painted on my face. I had absolutely no desire to carry on the conversation in the same vein. However, good manners compelled me to make further inquiry uh, or try to be polite. "What planet would you be from then?" I said. The location and coordinates he gave me sounded suspiciously reminiscent of something William Shatner might have said in his slimmer days. "Oh, how nice," I said. "Was it hard adjusting to life in this galaxy?" "Oh, not really," he said. "And now I've been here so long it feels like home. But," he whispered in a conspiratorial tone, "I think these things fighting with the cats in the picture here might be my people. They're coming back for me." "The space spooks?" I said, looking at his friend. "Well, then they must be aliens, right?" "Well, I'm not sure either," said Nate. "But they look more like ghosts to me." And that's where we end that chapter, okay? That was the chapter Out of the Woodwork. So, wet your whistles. Thanks for tuning in again. Hey, Rolla, good to see you. See Danetta, another Karen. Let people know what you're drinking. Say hi. If you're from out of the country, especially say hi. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And we'll read one more little chapter before we call it a night. Well, it's not such a little chapter. It's looks like 7 pages. But then tomorrow night, we'll get into the chapter where I start meeting real-life hobos in the neighborhood. I don't know if you knew, but there's still real-life hobos amongst us. And hobo, by the way, comes from the term homeward bound. So in the Great Depression, we know a lot about hobos, but these were people trying to get back, other places, the places where they came from. And even today, there's a hobo culture. I found out some interesting things, found some interesting symbols as well. So there's Mitzi and Margie. Good to see you back. Kyle, got another former student. All right. So sit back and another 15 minutes or so, then we'll be done. So this is another chapter I had a fun time writing. I kind of laughed a lot because, like I said, you just can't make some of this stuff up. But this chapter is called Big Mama Cheese. So remember, Nate and his friend were there telling me about the ghost aliens and the galaxies they were from. And then a couple days more went by, and then this happened. So, several nights later, the doorbell rang, and I sat up in bed. The dogs started barking, but I calmed them down and made them settle back in. A quick glance at the cell phone revealed that it was 3:30. Who would be stopping by at such a late hour? Hopefully it wasn't one of the neighborhood drunks looking for a handout. Since Nate and his friend with the etched teeth had shown up for bourbon in the front parlor, it seemed that more and more oddballs were making it a habit to ring the front door of La Casa Fabulosa. I snuck downstairs and pressed myself up against the wall in the foyer so as to keep out of sight of whoever stood at the door. It had worked before, so it couldn't hurt to try again. If it appeared to be an unsavory character or a weirdo, I would ignore the annoying doorbell and hope they went away. If it was someone I knew or someone in distress, I would let them in. Usually it was an unsavory character. From my post against the wall, I stuck my head out a bit and saw the shape of a woman on the front porch. With the glare from the streetlight behind, I couldn't make out much more than that, but I could tell that she had a frizzy mane of long black hair that provided an unruly frame to a face that I could not see. Although I felt a slight pang of hesitancy, I emerged from the shadows and turned on the light in the entry hall. Then I carefully opened the front door. So, I'm going to get situated here. So before me stood a woman who could have been anywhere from 40 to 70 years of age, and deep creases worked their way across a large, round face. She appeared to have something of a natural scowl, an attribute that was only heightened by the jowly makeup of her jaws. Her lower dark eyes darted back and forth as I studied her. "Yes," I said, trying not to sound annoyed. "Can I help you with something?" Her eyes rose and met mine, and I saw that she wore a type of black woolen cape over an old quilted housecoat. She wore pink fuzzy slippers as well, so I assumed she was from the neighborhood. "You need to be careful," she said in a halting voice. "Some people don't like what you're doing down here, you know." "Careful about what?" I said. "Careful about digging up ghosts in the neighborhood. Lots of people don't like that shit. She told me to tell you that." The woman turned her head and looked over her shoulder, and then looked over the other shoulder. "She who?" I asked. "I'm not sure what you're talking about." I couldn't decide if I should be alarmed or amused. Since word had gotten out about me writing the book of ghost stories, I found myself having more and more of these interesting conversations with the residents. "Her, the Big Mama Cheese," she whispered, pointing to her left breast. She made a dramatic sweep with her eyes. Again, the woman turned and looked over one shoulder and then the next. You call your boob the Big Mama Cheese?" I grabbed the door handle and got ready to leave just in case I'd have to make a speedy exit and shut out this nut job. "No, dummy. She's the Big Mama Cheese. She's hiding out there." She pointed at her breast again. Then she looked dramatically over her shoulders again. "I don't think I know any Big Mama Cheeses," I said, "and I'm sure I don't know who lives under your coat." Slowly, but only after two more dramatic over-the-shoulder ganders, the female visitor used one hand to slowly open the left side of her coat cape, and she extended a finger and pointed again. "Her, the Big Mama Cheese," she said. "Where?" I said. At first I didn't see anything. "What the devil are you talking about?" A patch of light blue suddenly caught my attention. Then a form gradually came into view as I stooped and angled my face to better see. It was a large plaster statue of the Virgin Mary the woman had cradled in the crook of her arm. "Oh," I said, "that Big Mama Cheese. Oh, how nice." "Yeah, her." She did the look around thing again and widened her eyes at me. "She told me to come over and check on you. Let you know that everything's going to be okay." "Oh, well, that's nice of you both," I said. I appreciate it a lot, and I slowly started to back away so I could close the door, trying my hardest not to give her the impression that I wanted to get rid of her. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I recalled a crazy woman talking to a statue of the Virgin Mary in a John Waters film. What was the name of that movie? "But watch out for the people who don't understand," she said. She lunged forward to wedge herself between the door and me. "Be careful." "Oh, I will," I said. "Thanks for stopping by." "Big Mama Cheese has got your back. Don't forget it." The woman closed the front of her cape and smoothed her hair. Then it appeared she lowered her head so she could whisper something to the statuette. Thanks, I won't. I managed to close the door and keep her outside. Thanks again. I turned to go upstairs and took a step, but then I decided to return to the door so I could watch her leave and see where she came from. But the porch and the front walk were both empty, and she was nowhere in sight. I hummed the melody of the theme from Twilight Zone and slowly made my way across the foyer so I could get back up to bed. The next time I saw my friend Kelly Atkins, I'd have to ask because he knew about Catholics, and maybe he knew who this woman was and who Mama Cheese was. I grasped the railing and took the first step to go upstairs, but then the telephone rang. After a moment's hesitation, I picked up. "Hello?" I said, curious as to who would be calling at such a late hour. "I see you finally got rid of that weirdo on your front porch, hon. I was going to call you and warn you, but you got to the door before the call went through." "Ah, Loretti, I should have known better." "I bet she was looking for a handout, wasn't she?" "Well, she was telling me to watch my back." I sat down on the bottom step of the stairs and listened to Loretti cough as she cleared her throat. "Say," I said, "aren't you up awfully late?" "Me?" she said, taking a noisy drink that caused ice cubes to clink together in her glass. "I don't sleep much, maybe a couple hours every night, and then all I do is hang upside down from the rafters a bit, like a bat." I laughed and told her that must be quite a sight. Then I grabbed the cord and pulled the phone into the parlor. At the front parlor, I flipped the light on and off 3 times. "Yeah, I see you down there," she said. "Here, hang on a second." I looked up and saw the lone window on the top floor fill with light and then go on and off. "Okay," I said, "I see you too." "So what was that dingbat telling you to watch out for?" said Loretti. Even though she said she didn't need much sleep, her voice had a tired edge to it. "Oh, that's... Some people don't like the fact that I was writing about the neighborhood," I said, "and the ghosts down here, but she told me that the Virgin Mary was watching out for me." "Oh, it was that nutbag with the little statue hidden under her coat, wasn't it?" said Loretti. "I thought it might have been her. If she isn't over on the corner of 4th and Crazy selling her charms and hitting people up for handouts, she's over at St. Louis Bertrand on 6th Street. I think that fatty young priest lets her camp out in one of the confessionals when she needs it and nobody else needs it." "Well, she seemed pretty harmless to me," I said, "but it's good to know you've been keeping an eye out." "Yep, good old Loretti keeps an eye out on the neighborhood," she said with a yawn. "Well, hon, I better let you go. Time for Loretti to go hang upside down from the rafters." "Thanks for calling," I said. "Good night." I put the phone back and went up to the 2nd floor. But at the top of the stairs, I realized I wasn't tired at all. I was wide awake and full of energy. So I decided to go for a walk. Since Fritz had gotten out of bed with me when the woman who was friends with Big Mama Cheese came to the front door, and he hadn't gone back to bed, I got his leash and we headed over to Central Park. There were no clouds in the sky that night, just lots of stars as we followed our usual route down 3rd Street and strolled through St. James Court. At the south end of the park, I found a large Osage orange tree that was as gnarled and whorled and twisted as the witch's tree, and we sat ourselves underneath it. Back across the street, the limestone of the massive Conrad Caldwell house seemed to glow in the darkness, and from my vantage point, I studied the squat turrets and towers that jutted above the roof line. Scattered here and there about the rough-hewn surfaces, whimsical yet menacing figures looked down at us from their perches where they were sculpted in the 1890s. Some had the visages of owls or lions, while others had faces of distinctly mythological creatures. We sat there in the shadows for half an hour, and aside from the sounds of the night, we were alone. Sitting under the tree and doing nothing except listening to the raccoons and squirrels in the branches, it made me hungry, which in turn made me think about recipes I had been working on for the previous few days. I decided to develop a recipe for fig cake with bourbon, but I hadn't been able to find any fresh figs. My Aunt Jane had sent some home canned figs up from Louisiana for the last Christmas, so I started thinking about using them, but then all of a sudden I remembered that there was a fig tree behind the Magnolia Bar and Grill on 2nd Street, just barely 2 blocks away. There were probably tons of figs on it at this time of year, so Fritz and I headed over that way. Even though the orange-red letters of the old neon sign out front spelled out Magnolia Bar and Grill, they stopped serving food years ago, but never quite got around to removing the grill part. It was always one of the better-known dives in old Louisville, and on any given night, you were sure to find a good mix of crusty locals, college students, and devotees from other parts of the city. That night, as Fritz and I came around the block to the Mag Bar, as most refer to it, there was still plenty of time before the 4 o'clock closing hour rolled around. Lively music dulled the overpowering din of conversation spilling out onto the street. Rounding the corner, I passed an old hitching post made of incised stone at the edge of someone's front yard, and I went inside to the bar. Through the front door and windows, it was easy to see the place was packed. Throngs of people bounced and gyrated to the music, and Justin, the bartender, looked on and smiled as several women got up to dance on the bar. Behind the building, Fritz and I slipped through a hole in the fence. We found oodles of ripe figs dangling from the branches. In the corner of an adjacent yard, a large bathtub Mary gazed somberly across the grass in our direction. Fortunately, I happened to spy 2 clean-looking plastic bags on the ground near the trash cans at the back door, and I seized them and quickly filled them with figs. When I turned to sneak through the back fence, I noticed a possum hidden among the fig leaves. Its beady eyes were watching me as it slowly nibbled on a large fig. As I made my way along the sidewalk, I almost collided with a passing figure, and I stepped aside to let him pass. When I looked up, I saw that it was Micah, the violin case swinging at his side as he walked toward 3rd Street. But instead of following him that way, we turned and went back to 2nd Street. For some reason, I still wasn't tired, and early morning hunger pains niggled at my stomach. So we crossed the intersection, walked over to 1st Street, and down a couple of blocks to Juanita's Burger Boy. Juanita's, as most people called it, was one of the few restaurants in the city that stayed open 24 hours a day. It was a notorious dive. For breakfast, it couldn't be beat. A row of white lights twinkled along the low roof as we approached, passing a front yard where an enormous rose of Sharon bush seemed to collapse beneath its own weight. Streaked with red, a multitude of lavender blooms caught the glow of a nearby coach lamp, and when we arrived at the door to the restaurant, there didn't appear to be much activity inside. Aside from an older gentleman nursing a cup of coffee at one end of the counter, there was only a young couple sitting at a two-top near the door. But I knew that would change when the bars closed and hundreds of hungry college kids turned out onto the streets of old Louisville. I tied up Fritz outside near a window so I could keep an eye on him. He sadly wagged his stub of a tail and lowered his head when I assured him I wouldn't be gone too long. I found a stool at the counter and let the woman at the grill pour me a cup of coffee. Then she removed the pen from behind her ear and pulled her pad of paper out of an apron pocket. I ordered a platter of scrambled eggs with hash browns and whole wheat toast. For Fritz, I got a side of bacon. When the food came and I took the bacon out to him, he gobbled it up in 2 bites and let out a long howl of appreciation. Back at the counter, I had almost finished my food when someone sat down next to me at the counter. I looked up and saw that it was Kim Bob, a man from our neighborhood association who sometimes liked to dress as a woman. When he was dressed as a male, he had told us he preferred it when people called him Bob, his real name. But when he was dressed as a female, he wanted to be called Kim. Since nobody really knew if he was going to be dressed as a woman or a man on any given day, most of the neighbors just called him Kim Bob. In all the time I'd ever seen him, however, he was always dressed as Kim, and that night was no different. He wore a brown wig with straight hair to the shoulders, and he had on a gold lame party dress trimmed with black velvet. If I wasn't mistaken, it was the same dress he had been wearing the first time we met a half year before. So I just joined the neighborhood association and was attending my first meeting, and I assumed, I later found out, it was the first time Kim Bob came out dressed as a woman. The meeting was at Clark and Polly Wood's house on 3rd Street. And when Kim Bob walked in that night and sat down next to me and Ramon on a large sofa, he introduced himself as Kim. I complimented I complimented him on his nice dress, and we chatted a bit before the meeting started. A couple of minutes later, when Clark Wood walked in and sat down next to his wife, the elderly man spied what he assumed to be a new member perched on his couch. So he leaned over and loudly whispered, "Who's that over there in the gold dress?" in Polly's ear. "Is she new to the neighborhood?" Polly, in return, slapped her husband playfully on the arm. "Clark, that's Bob," she said in a low voice. "You already know him." Polly had a head of snowy white hair and brushed a strand back from behind an ear. "Who?" said Clark, who was a bit hard of hearing. "I don't think I know her." "Of course you do," Polly replied. "That's Bob from down the street." A look of confusion caused Clark's brow to wrinkle. "Who?" he insisted. "That's Bob from down the street," Polly replied, raising her voice and leaning in closer to her husband. There was a momentary pause while the words sank in, and then Clark's eyes opened wide with the realization. "No shit," he said in a tone of slow wonderment. And the meeting was soon called to order. That night at Juanita's Burger Boy, I finished the scrambled eggs in near silence because Kim Bob didn't appear to be in a chatty mood. Before I knew it, the stool next to me was empty, and the hungry after-hours bar crowd started filling up the place. I went out front where several people had gathered around Fritz to say hello, and he offered eager tail wags in exchange for them scratching the top of his head. When I approached the little cluster, I saw that one of them looked familiar. It was Bo, who had on the same dark trench coat, but this time his long brown hair had been pulled back in a ponytail. A smile spread across his face when he saw me. "I thought this here dog looked like someone I knew." He turned to his companions and told them to go inside and get a table where he would join them shortly. "Dude," he said, coming closer, "I've been meaning to come by and see you." "Well, if you do come by," I said, "feel free to use the doorbell." "Man, don't say that word." He scrunched up his nose and shook his head as if a shudder had run down his spine. "I hate those things and you know it." "So, what were you going to tell me this time?" "Remember the other night when we saw that goat on 4th Street? He jammed his hands into the coat pockets and hunched his shoulders. "Yeah," I said. I saw you go after it. Did you follow it over to Central Park?" "Damn straight," he said. "That crazy old goat just ran into the park and then back out again and then started running all over the whole neighborhood. I followed it for half an hour before it made its fool way back to the park." I suppressed a grin at the thought of Bo chasing the goat around old Louisville, and I untied Fritz from the bike rack in front of the diner. "And what happened when you finally caught up with it?" "That's the thing I wanted to tell you about," he said. "Remember that woman we saw? The one all dressed in white with the bandana on her head?" I nodded my head and stepped to the side so several rowdy people could enter the restaurant. "Yeah, what about her?" Bo motioned for me to follow him to a small wrought iron table and chairs at the sidewalk. "Well, she was there, and the goat just walked up to her like it knew what he was supposed to do. Not only that, she wasn't alone. She had several people there, and it was sort of like they were doing a ritual or something." "Really?" I said. "What were they doing?" "I'm not sure," said Bo. "They stood around in a circle under one of those big oak trees, and they were speaking some kind of gibberish in a weird language I couldn't understand. But the goat waited there in the middle, not saying a thing." "They didn't hurt the goat or anything, did they?" "I don't think so," he said. "They ended up putting it on a rope and taking it away when they saw me. I was hiding behind a tree, trying to stay out of sight. But then one of them saw me, and they decided to break things up." "How many of them were there?" I said. "What else were they doing?" "Not really sure, dude," he said. 5, 6. They had a little fire going, and they were passing around a bottle or something. The one we saw wasn't in charge, though. I think she just delivered the goat and then beat it." "Josephine wasn't in charge? I thought she would have been the leader." Bo shook his head. "The leader was a really short little woman with dark, frizzy hair, and she had this weird little friend in a black cape at her side who kept pulling out the statue of the Virgin Mary and pretending like she was talking to it and listening to it." "The Big Mama Cheese?" Huh? He said. That's what the odd one calls her little Virgin Mary statue, the Big Mama Cheese. Whatever. You know the life story of every last weirdo in this neighborhood, don't you? He said. No comment, I said. Well, you should have seen the other women assisting them. They were each like 7 feet tall. He held a hand above his head to illustrate. That's awfully tall, I said. Maybe they had on high heels or something. I don't know, but they were some tall bitches, that's for sure. Bo leaned over and patted Fritz on the head. Well, I need to go inside and get me some food. Just wanted to let you know what I saw. I guess it was kind of like a voodoo ceremony or something like that. He stopped and scratched his chin for a moment. Or, wait, man, maybe they were like druids or something. Maybe it was like some type of full moon ritual. He cupped his hand in his chin, and he continued, and he squinted. Trippy, he said. Speaking of trippy, I did some research, and I have an old newspaper article. You'll want to see it, I said. Yeah, about what? Your one-armed ghost. No way. You mean you found something? Well, maybe, but I found an article in the Atlanta Constitution from March 17th, 1903. That morning in Louisville, somebody found the decaying arm of an unknown black woman hanging from the front door of a 4th Street mansion. And after snooping around for the address, it looks like the mansion was the one that we were next to as we were looking for the ghost creeping around in the backyard. No way! You think that was Josephine's arm? I have no idea what to think, I said. This neighborhood is something else. Stop by sometime and I'll give you a copy of the article. Sure thing, dude. Well, I don't want to keep you, I said, pointing to the crowded interior of the diner where his friends waited at a table against the dark paneled wall. Nice seeing you again. And thanks for the information. Yeah, man, he said. Good seeing you, too. I'll probably run into you in the park or on the sidewalk sometime soon. Bo left and joined his friends. But when I turned to go, there was a terrible screeching of tires as a black Cadillac swerved at the intersection and came barreling towards me and Fritz. So there we got another cliffhanger tonight. So tune in tomorrow night and we will see what came barreling at me and Fritz outside of Juanita's Burger Boy. So, what was it? Tonight was night 9 of reading from Voodoo Days at La Casa Fabulosa. So thanks for checking in. We're going on almost 3 weeks of meeting here almost every night. So glad to see all the regulars tuning back in and glad to see some new faces. But once again, I'm David Domine, telling stories to help while away the quarantine hours. So good to see you all. Plan on tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. Tell your friends, bring some friends along. And yeah, Margie, I'll read tomorrow night, so don't worry. Just tune in tomorrow night. We'll see what it was. But so now we got this much of the book left. Okay, so we can get another week or so out of this. I might have to intersperse some more stories or commentary to stretch it out, but I think we've got another good solid week. So thanks again, everyone. Good seeing you. I hope you're all doing well and holding up. And I look forward to seeing you all every night. So thanks again. Sleep well. Have a drink of bourbon. I'm going to do my last little drink tonight and sign off this way. Cheers. Love you all. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Good night.